Now, I do this video with a decent amount of regularity, probably every 6 months, but it's because I always get asked the question, Nick, how can you do it? So, here are my tips. Hello, and the warmest of welcomes to today's video. For those of you who haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Nick, fab to have you here. For those of you who have seen my face before, thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you're enjoying my videos. I put out videos roughly 3 times a week on a range of different topics, anywhere from fashion to slightly more personal topics. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please do head down, hit subscribe, and turn on notification bell. I love chatting with you all. I'm all about living life loud, and what that means to me is being your authentic self, being proud to be you, and just celebrating who you are. Celebrating yourself, and of course, celebrating others. So, those of you who have been subscribers for a while know I love a good high heel. I do. And that can shock people where they're like, oh my goodness, a man who wears high heels. Oh, who cares? It's fashion, it's fun. Be yourself, self-expression. Who gives a shit? In all honesty, some people do. I'm not one of them, okay? I'm going to wear what I want to wear because I like it. And that's okay. Doesn't bother me. They're on my feet. Nobody else's. But I quite often get asked the question of, Nick, love the shoes. How can you walk in them? Because I like the high heel, okay? The high heel. And to be honest, I wouldn't have it any other way. But I thought I would just share with you, some of you have maybe seen some of these videos before, but I would share with you some of my top tips for if, like me, you love a high heel, but you hate how they feel on your feet, some tips in order to try and make them as comfortable as possible. And I say comfortable as possible because you are never going to have an amazingly comfortable high heel. It's just, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There are some that I hear are much more comfortable than others. There are certain brands that I hear are much more comfortable than others. In all honesty, I don't own really any luxury high heels, but if I were to be looking for comfort, I hear good things about Jimmy Choo. I hear good things about Manolo Blahnik. As much as I think they are ghastly, I hear good things about their YSL tributes. Of course, terrible things about Louboutins. I've owned Louboutins as well. I don't own any of the high-heeled Louboutins, but even their flats aren't that comfortable. Sketchy things about Giuseppe Zanotti, etc. But like I said, I hear really good things about Jimmy Choo. I also hear good things about Amin and Wadi. Quality aside, but that's a different topic. Never own them. Can't really comment on that, but from what I hear, quality, iffy. But anyhow, what are some of my top tips, okay? These are in no particular order. No particular order. The first one though, and this I think is a really important one, regardless, some of them will feel more obvious than others, but this one for me is actually the most pivotal because it impacts how you walk in the shoe, okay? Fasten it to the foot. This heel is stonkingly high. This is 160 millimeters. It has a concealed platform. It is so high, but it is really quite easy to walk in. And on a comfort scale, on the scale from like sneaker to heel, you know, it's still quite, you know, uncomfortable. But as heels go, these are like a 9 for a heel. They feel a lot lower than they are, but that's partly for a different reason. But by fastening these to the foot, I'm not worried about slipping. I feel secure, and therefore I feel like I can stride with confidence. And I think when you're striding with confidence, the shoe feels more comfortable. It feels more natural. It feels more a part of you as an individual, which then impacts how you feel in it. And so I always recommend fastening to the foot. The boot is the preference because that is how you will be best fastened into the shoe. So this has a zip. Of course, you might have some that have laces, etc. But I always think a boot is a great thing. Stops you from falling out of the shoe, stops stops the teeter-tottering that you tend to see, because that's about confidence. You can feel much more confident in a shoe that's fastened. However, you can of course also go for something that has a strap, and something that's maybe a bit more like a Mary Jane style, something that's a T-bar style of shoe. This is quite a thin ankle strap, but it does the trick. These aren't particularly comfortable, but more because of how the toe box here is formed, not the toe box, the edge here forms onto your foot. But from a comfort in terms of feeling secure in them, that strap does a great thing. These are 115 millimeters, I want to say. How cool is this, by the way? Because this was the color that they were originally, but then the sun has bleached them. But I love this kind of ombre effect that's happened. This is just a pair of ASOS shoes, but I love this kind of ombre effect that it's created. I think that's really cool. But yeah, fastening the shoe to the foot is absolutely a great recommend. If you want to wear a higher heel, I think you can feel more comfortable, more positive, more confident in something that's fastened. I immediately recommend that. Now, the thing that is often considered more obvious, dropping the heel height. The lower the heel, on the whole, there are exceptions to this rule, but on the whole, the shoe will be more comfortable. It's just the way it is, because the slope that you are asking your foot to be in is lower. So let's take these two as an example. Here I have an 120 millimeter heel, one of my favorite pairs of shoes. And then here I have an 100. So you can see there's differences, and it's the fact that the arch of the foot is less. The slope is less. So you are placing less pressure on the ball of your feet, and you are stretching the arch, the inside of the foot, less. So it just feels infinitely more comfortable. And that can be quite subtle when you go through certain heights. So like a 65 millimeter heel to a 55 to a 65 might not feel quite so significant. Even 55 to 85 doesn't always feel so bad. 55 to 100 feels quite significant. 100 to 120, because you're just pushing your heel that bit higher, that makes a really big difference. These are infinitely more comfortable than these, I have to say. They really, truly are. And the heel height has a huge part to play in that. But that's okay, because these are worth it, because these look so good on. But these are much more comfortable. If you were wearing them all day, these you would get much more enjoyment out of wearing than these. And I've worn them both. But yeah, the heel height makes a big difference. The heel height, I think, is really the perfect heel height for someone who wants to wear heels but doesn't want to feel that their foot is at too aggressive an angle, is the 85 millimeter. And I think an 85 millimeter stiletto looks incredibly chic. So if someone said to me, Nick, could you recommend a heel height for someone who's maybe not as experienced wearing heels, doesn't like to wear heels that often, I would say an 85 millimeter would be my recommendation. Now, whilst I've got these two, another topic, the thickness of the heel. I don't own a block heel, so I can't really show you, but the thickness of the heel makes a big difference. And a lot of that is because of stability. The thicker the heel, the likelihood is the more stable it's going to be. Block heels, block sandals are becoming much more popular. Wedges, although you don't see people wearing wedges as much, those very much had their moment, because from a stability perspective, they were much more comfortable and you could feel more stable in them, and therefore you could feel more confident. Similar thought process to why you would fasten to the foot. But also the thickness of the heel means that you are placing less pressure of the sole of your heel into basically almost like a little needle. The thicker that is, the more evenly the weight will be distributed, which means that you're not placing the pressure into a single point quite so aggressively. Whereas when you've got a very thin heel like this, or something like the Kurt Geiger Bond, which is really, really thin, you're placing that pressure much more acutely. That will always have an impact. And again, whilst I've got these, another thing to think about. If you want height, but you don't want the same level of discomfort as a non-platform 120, consider a platform. You don't have to get a 160 to get a platform. You can buy 100mm heels that have concealed platforms. You can buy 120s that have concealed platforms. And the beauty of this, as I alluded to earlier, is that it feels like you're walking on less than you are. So this is a 3-inch platform. This is a 6.5-inch heel. So technically, you're walking on 3.5. You are very aware of the fact that this is a 6.5-inch heel when you are wearing it, because you are elevated quite significantly in this shoe. However, it is much more comfortable and much more bearable and much easier to walk in, might I add, because of that platform. Not everyone likes the look of platforms. Some people think platforms are tacky. I disagree. I love the stiletto platform. I always have. I would still wear, I wasn't wearing heels at the time when Louboutin platforms were all the rage, but I would still wear those Louboutin platforms. If they did them in my size, I would be buying them up, because you can get them for great deals pre-loved, and I think they are sexy as hell. But I really do like the platform from time to time. However, I do still tend to opt for the 120 no platform. You feel every step in a completely different way to this. Infinitely more comfortable. Like I said, as heels go, this is a 9. As heels go, this is a 2. But this is worth it, and I use this so much. And one of the reasons I also really like this shoe is, taking out the fact that it's super high, the material makes a big difference. It's a very kind of pliable material. It doesn't dig. Whereas I find something like this with the patent, if you've not properly worn it in, digs a significant amount. Material is really important. I never recommend lace. And the reason I never recommend lace is because you can very easily fall out of it, so that your toes will be clinging for dear life at the front of the shoe just to keep your foot inside it. That isn't good. You do not want your shoe to feel like it's going to fall off. We're back to the fact that it fastens. But if you don't want one that fastens, like this doesn't fasten, but the material, it's malleable enough that your foot can move, your foot can breathe, there's a comfort there, but it's not so unstable or not so pliable that my foot would easily fall out of it. Another option, and this is a really good example, this is comfortable. This is an 115mm heel, but what I love about this is it's got this plexi, it's got this cutout here which allows my foot to breathe. It's got this fairly pliable, but still quite secure material here. Plus it's got this plexi, which is super comfortable, has molded to my foot, but it also stops your foot from slipping because it somewhat sticks to the plexi. I love these. Like Gianvito Rossi did a lot of plexi pumps. These are ASOS. A lot of my heels are ASOS. I love them, and I think they're really quite chic. I love the silver. I think they're quite sexy, but they're very comfortable because they've got this cutout and the material is correct. This has gone slightly the other way because patent, like I said, isn't always the most comfortable at first. These slightly missed the mark because they were uncomfortable whilst the patent was being worn in and molding to the foot. Then it seemed to jump from molding to my foot to suddenly being far too stretched out, and my foot now just falls out of them. They now feel too big. There was never a middle ground where I had this great level of comfort. They went from feeling tight and uncomfortable, particularly around the ridge here, to all of a sudden being too big, falling off my foot. There was no middle ground. I missed it. So these don't get worn that often anymore. But that's because then the material with patent, it just overstretched. That can happen. C'est la vie. But anyway, material is really important, but don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, lace or something along those lines, a very kind of light fabric. My foot will be able to breathe, my foot will be able to move. The fact that your foot can move so much could be part of the downfall. And lastly, I would say something that I think a lot of people do consider, but maybe should give a little bit more consideration to, the toe box of your shoe. The toe box is really important because, as we've said, you're putting your heel into a slope. You are forcing the pressure into the ball of your foot, and therefore your toes have to go somewhere, and you are forcing them into whichever space the heel ends in. So take these again as examples, okay? Let's take this. This has quite a pointed toe box, quite an aggressive toe box, really. Fairly long, which helps because your toes then don't come to a complete close. However, still fairly pointed. My foot is not naturally in this triangular shape, in all honesty. So therefore it has to make itself fit there. And this is a high heel, this is 115 millimeters. So I am placing a lot of pressure in the ball of the foot here, and I'm really sloping in. So with every step that I'm taking, I am pushing my toes into the toe box. So the toe box needs to have enough room to accommodate. A very pointed shoe like this, whilst they are very glamorous and whilst they are very attractive, in my opinion, not always the most comfortable from that perspective. Rounded toes, much more comfortable because they are more evenly distributed. Your feet can kind of stay a little bit more in their natural shape. However, I think look sometimes a little bit more old-fashioned, not quite as chic, but that's okay. However, I always think a great compromise, he says with 90% of his heels being very pointed, but a great compromise is the almond toe. This is still a fairly pointed almond toe, but it is nowhere near as pointed as some of these other options. And this just gives your foot a little bit more space when it's being pushed into the ball of your foot, when it's being pushed down in that slope. It is not requiring your foot to as aggressively alter its natural shape in order to fit into the shoe. And that can make a really big difference. And that you might not feel that instantly. You might not feel that within the first 30 minutes. But believe you me, if you're wearing them 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, you will feel the benefit of just having a little bit more room to move. Or if you scrunch your toes just to kind of give them a little bit of a wiggle, you'll have the room to do that. Sometimes in these really, really pointed shoes like this, there's no room to even give your toes a little bit of a wiggle. So just something to think about. People, I think, know about the toe box, but often underestimate the toe box. It is incredibly important. If I had to say what would make the perfect shoe from a comfort perspective, I would say you are probably looking at a shoe with an ankle strap that is 85 millimeters in a fairly thick stiletto heel with a rounded to almond toe and a good sole. Of course you can put pads in, but again that detracts them from the space that you have inside the shoe, so just be conscious of that. But I would say that combination would be a pretty comfortable shoe. Do I own any of those? No. Do many brands make them? Yeah, I think they probably do. I think you probably have to have a bit of a search. But the trend of the really high 120s or the platforms, yes, it came back. Yes, it did. But I don't think the consumer's desire for comfort went away either. So brands didn't ditch their more comfortable variations in favor of the higher options. They just added to the higher options. So you can still get them. I am not a lover of the kitten heel. I'll be honest about it. I'm not. But I do think 85 millimeters is a great heel height. If you want it to be a bit more comfortable, like I said, thicken the heel, even out the weight distribution, round out the toe box, give your toes a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more room for maneuver, and do yourself a favor, either make it a boot or get an ankle strap so that you fasten it to your foot and then you can walk with confidence, because ultimately that's what it's all about. It's about feeling confident, and there is nothing worse than the Bambi on ice, teeter-totter, where someone looks painfully uncomfortable in their shoes. You just look at them and think, why are you wearing them? They're causing you that much discomfort and distress. Take them off. Honestly, do yourself a favor. So there we have it, everyone. Those are my hints and tips. Let me know what you think. Are you a fan of the high heel like me? Do you prefer flats? Do you prefer mid-range heels? Do you prefer stilettos, block heels? Do you prefer boots? Do you prefer sandals? You know, what is your thought on this? Love to hear from you. Thank you so much as always for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye now.